Was good job tonight. I wanted to talk about the question I asked you guys earlier when I said good morning. If you guys had any questions, so we could go over some of the questions that you guys put in the chat, and then we'll call it a night from there. All right. Before we get into that, though, I I feel like it's coming to the holidays, the end of the year. Obviously, buyers, sellers, things may slow down, but I don't feel like that's an excuse for you guys to slow down or myself as well. Like, I feel like this is where, yeah, you may not be marketing as much, but there's always something that you can be doing. So, like getting your system down pat, getting your processes down pat, if you're switching from REI Cash to a new texting platform, getting that process up and started so you're prepared for next year. All right. Uh, I believe REI Cash, they're moving their platform into a different platform right now. So that's where the delay is for them. But if you join their live call, I believe they actually have one going on live right now, and it's working with the new platform. So if you guys wanted to stay with, REI Cash or, just move your information over, you could use that new platform that they're switching to. Or you could end up getting a new texting platform, whichever one you prefer, whichever one is going to have you consistently marketing. That's where I'll say focus on.
Oh, you see it, Quentin.
All right. So that's with that. But still, I would say still look in those areas right now. My buyer's still looking in Port St. John and the Royal Highlands area in Sebastian, Florida. So those would be areas that I would tell you guys to more so focus on going into this next month, just because they didn't find what they were looking for this month or they didn't fill up. So right now, if you're, let's say you're cold calling, maybe switch it up in those areas and go to texting. Or if you're texting, maybe go to cold calling or, just send out mail to those areas. Send out either a letter or postcards to those areas and see if you could get something from that. Because a lot of times with this business, what I notice from doing this is I believe we have a lead generation problem. Like we're not getting enough leads coming in. We might get cold leads that want $1 million or people that say yes, but they want $1 million. But those aren't really leads. Leads are the sellers that we could potentially close either within 30 days or 6 months from now. So their price may be a little bit high, but it's still in the price range. If the market shifts, we could possibly do it. Or if they go through a situation where they might want, let's say in Port St. John, the buyer's at 68, the seller is at 70, and now due to the holidays, Christmas, they're willing to drop their price a little bit, right? Those would be considered leads to me. Like, and we have to generate more of those. So going into this new year, what I'm focusing on, because I can only really tell you guys from my experience, I'm going to focus more on direct mail going into this new year, right? Reaching out to or sending out mail to these landowners where I have like specific buyers to, because most of us are probably cold calling, most of us are texting. So I feel like we have to master each one to reach as many of the land sellers, because when you send out text, you may only reach 10% of people or 15 or 20. If you're cold calling, you're going to reach less than that. So you might reach only 5 to 7%. But there's still so many sellers that you never made an offer to or got in contact with that is either waiting for your offer so that they could sell, or they might be at a little bit higher price and you can't do nothing now, but within 3 6 months they might be at the price that you can make money, wholesaling their property. So that's why I would say going into the new year, maybe you guys should start doing some direct mail as well. I know it's pricey, and so this is where I would say this is where you got to save up, right? We're running a business here, so you got to save up, put money to the side, so you could do more marketing, so you could get more leads, so you could get more closings. So continue doing what you're doing with the texting, cold calling, but also don't forget the direct mail, right? And then with direct mail, uh, I'm using the guy Jake REI Print Mail. We did a call with them about a month ago or 2 months ago with Ethan. This is my first time using them. I usually use yellow letters, but what the thing I like about them is he's more hands-on. So I'll put his contact after this call if you guys want to do mail as well. And he'll help you with your first campaign. And then what I like about them is they have a reference number that they put on the mailing piece. So it makes it a lot easier when the seller calls you back and they give you the reference number. So let's say the reference number is, you know, 2, right? If they give you the reference number while you're on the phone with them, you could look up the lot, within 5 to 10 seconds, and now be able to, you go to PropStream, look at what to offer the seller, and be able to give your offer much quicker than, your typical mail where they just reach back out. You have to, let them know that you call them back. You're not in the office right now. Allow me to evaluate the lot before I could give you an offer. That just, time and speed is important in this game as well. So I feel like when the seller is calling you, you definitely want to make sure that you're prepared. And with that reference number, it allows you to be prepared. So we could go more into that, but I just want to answer some questions. So first thing, and a common thing that you guys were saying was negotiating, right? So with negotiating, it's a, how should I say it? With the land business, to me, it's not really a negotiation. I mean, yes, there's points where you will be negotiating with a seller, but for the most part, it's it's finding those deals, right? So let's say you find a deal, you are negotiating. Let's focus on that. So one, I would say you'll really have to understand the seller, right? And what I mean by that is some sellers they want a quicker closing. Some sellers want a higher price. Some sellers, they all have different reasons. So what I feel like you guys should do, and what I like to do is I like to create win-win, or you and you and them versus the problem, you and them versus the company. So I always like to position myself as if I'm helping the seller. So one of the things that I like to do, right? And this is I'm gonna just give you guys like an example. If the buyer is at 70,000 and the seller's at like 73, because that happens. You'll get a seller that's like 3 or 4 or 5,000 above like a price that a buyer could do. I always let them know, like, hey, typically we buy at this price, but allow me to do this. Let me speak to my manager. Let me see if I could get him at this price, right? And if I can, would you be willing to meet us in the middle? I like to always position that as like, let's meet in the middle. So, like, let's say the buyer's at 70, they're at, let's say 73, right? So I'm always positioning it like, hey, Mr. Seller, currently right now we are buying lots for 62,000. But let me do this. Let me speak to my manager. Let me see if I could get him to increase that price. If I could get him up a couple thousand to around 66, we'll take care of the closing costs. we'll close at our earliest convenience. Do you think that's a price that you could move forward with? And then just when you give out your offer too, you want to be quiet. You don't want to over talk as well. And I feel like that's what I used to do in the beginning. I'll make my offer, and then I'll also, if they don't say yes right away, I will say something and probably self-sabotage myself. But once you give your offer, hear what they got to say, right? They might say 66, we can't do 66, but if you could do 68 and take care of the closing costs, we'll move forward, right? And this is how you got a seller down a couple thousand. And yeah, you didn't make a lot of money from that deal, right? Because the buyer's at 70, but 2,000, that adds up, right? Even in deals that the seller is at your price. So let's say the seller is at 65,000 and your buyer's at 70, right? And you're trying to make, a $7,000 deal instead of a 5K deal. Now, all the times, I wouldn't say do this all the time, especially if you don't have multiple deals in the pipeline and you're just trying to get a deal going through. I would say, go with that 5,000, right? But like, let's say you have a couple deals in the pipeline, trying to make an extra, 1,000 or two. The same thing. I would say, 65. Right now we are buying lots for 60, but let me do this. Allow me to speak to my manager. I believe I could get him up a couple thousand. If I can, do you think you can meet us as, 63 or 63,500? We'll also take care of the closing costs, close at your earliest convenience or the earliest we can. But we just need to schedule that environmental study. But if I could get them at 63,500, is that a price you can move forward with today? And then be quiet, see what they say, because that's how you could possibly get an extra 1,000, 2 or 3,000 on top of that deal. So that's what I used to do, especially in the beginning, to turn a 5K deal into an 8K deal, turn a 10K deal into a 12K deal, things like that. A lot of times too, even if they're at 65,000, you don't want to agree right away, right? So that's another thing. If you come off as if you won, like if you seem too excited, they could feel that. They feel, and they didn't sign any papers yet. There's no closing date, nothing. So you can't seem too excited. Like when you seem too excited, that's usually when they don't pick up the call or don't sign the contract. So if they're at 65,000 and the buyer's at 70, and you're basically at a 5K assignment, you still kind of want to say that you want to speak to your manager. Typically we do a lower price. Let's say you say 60,000, but you'll not fight, but you'll discuss with your manager, see if, because their land is flat. You even give them props about their land. Your land is in a real desirable area where we bought and built previously. So I do think I could get him up that 5,000. But if I can get him to 65, is that a price you can move forward with today? And then be quiet, right? So you see how I didn't just agree to 65? I let them know, like, typically we buy at a lower price, but you're going to discuss with your manager because you really want the lot to get them to 5K. So now instead of like, you could have two scenarios. You could have that one scenario where you seem like kind of thirsty, like, hey, can I get your email? We'll send you over the contract. We could do 65. Or you could say, typically we do buy at 60, but allow me to discuss with my manager. I do think I could get him up that 5,000 because this is an area where we bought and built before. So if I can get him to 65,000 and we'll take care of the closing costs, is this a price you can move forward with today? Oh, yes, Elijah. Yeah. What does the process look like? And that's another thing that's super important is practicing the closing process. So maybe we should, I'm not sure if this in the script area. I know I had it in one of my scripts. Maybe you need to update that for you guys, but you want to make sure you can explain the closing process. So after you get, let's say, a seller to agree on the price, they say, yeah, we could do 65, you know. So boom. From there, I'll even let them know, like, hey, just give me a minute. Let me speak to him right real quick. Give me 2 minutes and see if we could do 65. I'll put the phone on mute, active. I'm talking to somebody, my manager, come back in a minute or two, let them know we could do it. And then from there, I always ask for the email. The email is extremely important because we don't mail contracts. And the reason why I don't like mailing contracts is usually when you mail a contract, that contract does not come back, right? A lot of times these sellers hold the contracts, they get cold feet, they speak to a cousin that's a realtor, things like that. So I always want to get the email because the email is going to be the fastest, quickest way we could get the process started. Remember, I told you speed kills deals. If you wait too long, it kills the deal. So I always ask for the email and then I let them know, like, hey, if you could just give me a working email, what I could do is could send this over to my manager, Elijah. He'll write up the purchase agreement. Should take him about 30 to 45 minutes. And after he's done, he's going to send that to you to your email through DocuSign. And if after you sign, we'll send it over to the title company and we'll begin the process. Okay, what is the process? Do I have to actually go to the closing table or do I have to go to the title company? Oh, no, 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 sir. Everything is done virtually, especially after COVID. You know, they implemented the process of virtual closings. All you will have to do is after we do our environmental study, our survey, this usually takes us around 15 to 20 days to get done. After everything comes back clear, the title company will mail you the closing documents. Now, the closing documents is the documents that you will sign. You will need a notary to sign. They'll have a notary come to your house or, you know, any local bank or anywhere that you feel comfortable signing. And after you sign, you'll mail that back to the title company. From that day, once they receive the closing documents back in the mail, they'll either issue you a cashier's check or a wire transfer to your account. Does that make sense? Oh, that makes perfect sense. Okay. All right. So are you going to be updating me through this process? Yes, sir. As soon as we get the environmental study done, I'll let you know. And I also will have the closing agent from the title company contact you as well because they're going to need some information from you. All right. Oh, that makes perfect sense. All right. Well, if you have any questions, you could call me at any time. This is my direct line, and I'll speak to you soon. Perfect. And right there, you just showed them the process. You explained it clearly. Whenever they had a question, you answered it, and now they move forward with you. So really practice that closing ending statement of the closing process. You know, getting the signed contract, sending it to the title company, let them know you have to do an inspection, which is the environmental study, the survey. Oh, what's an environmental study? Oh, that's just the study we do because there are endangered species that habitat on these lots, especially if they're sit for years. I've seen that you own this lot for 20 years. So we do want to make sure that there aren't any gopher tortoises or burrowing owls on the lot. Uh, if that comes back clear, then more than likely we're ready to close. And then from there, boom, boom, boom. So as long as you can explain that process to the seller and have it as clear as day, they will work with you if you guys are at the right price. So that's where I feel like is important when you're negotiating with a seller as well. Another thing that I feel like worked with me, and this is after I read the book. I believe it was Never Split the Difference. He always said, or he said, label the seller's emotions. So using phrases like it seems like or it sounds like, right? So, for example, it sounds like you want to get this lot so quickly without a lot of back and forth. You seem like you owned it for a lot of years. So, if we could give you a price of 30,000, take care of the closing costs, would that be a price you would move forward with? So that's just like an example. But I like to say statements like that, it seems like or it sounds like, because you're labeling their emotions. You hear what they say and you kind of want to label it so they could, it's like building rapport, is dropping their you know, a lot of sellers they have like a guard. They don't know us. They never seen us. We're a phone call. So it's kind of like dropping their guard. So make sure you use statements like that. It seems like. So I'll say it again. Seems like you want to get this lot so quickly. You owned it for years. And you don't want to have to deal with a lot of back and forth, paying taxes year by year. So if I can, get you at that price of 65,000, pay the closing costs, is that a price you will move forward with today? So these are just statements I like to say, whenever I'm speaking to a seller, just so I could build more rapport with them. All right. So one, I would say you and them versus like the problem, which is negotiating the deal. So always you're working with the seller, right? You and them versus the company. You're never the boss of your company, right? And this is why I feel like JVs work so good with the group, is because when you guys contact these sellers, right? And then I send them my contract, or they're looking up my company. Oh, they seen that the company's been up and going for 6 years now. That's when I got my LLC, so they'll see that. Okay, like this is a reputable company. They'll see the reviews online. Oh, okay, this is a real company. So now it drops their guard, like they feel more safe. So this is where you and them basically verse me, right? Make me as the bad guy, right? I have to speak to my manager, or my manager is kind of at this price, but I'm gonna work my hardest to get him to increase that price for you. And if I can you meet me somewhere in the middle? I know you're at 70, we're at 60. Can we meet at 65,000? We'll take care of the closing costs. I know you're behind on your taxes. We usually pay the prorated taxes as well. Is this a price we can move forward with? So just, practice those statements and then label the emotions. Like I said, use phrases like it seems like, it sounds like, after you hear what they say. And like just create win-win options, right? So if you can't do a cash offer, as I was telling you guys before, and the price is a little bit too high. Now, if they're way overpriced, it doesn't make sense for us listing it, because we're not going to make no money. They're not going to make no money, things like that. But if they're around retail price and we could list it for a little bit more and we can make a couple thousand and they could get the price that they want, that's a win-win option. So that's why I tell you guys, present that offer as well. If they're not too far off from like my builder's price, they might be, let's say my builder is at 70 and they're stuck at 73, that's a lot that we could potentially still make money on by listing it on the market for, let's say, 80, because the buyer may come in at like 77, right? And after paying the agent, their commission, we still get paid from that deal. And the seller knows what we're doing. So we don't have with the inspection period, sometimes you'll have that period where you're nervous because it's like, dang, I got this lot under contract. I don't have a buyer for it, things like that. But when you present a listing agreement, it takes that fear or that anxiety from you, because you're listing it, right? You're not technically buying it, or they believe you're listing it. Well, you are listing it, but you get what I'm saying. So use that, create win-win options. So don't just think of cash offer. Also think, okay, cash offer doesn't work. What can I do to get this lot sold? And that's another option. And sometimes that'd be the better option because it might take you 60 days on the market to sell. But since they agreed to listing it, you still might make money at the end of those 60 days. And then a lot of times, another thing that I would say for negotiation before I ask you guys a question is when the seller gives you a price, I want you guys to start saying, and if it's like a little bit above what you would do, like if they're at 75 or 80 and the buyer's paying 70 or 65,000, I want you to ask them, how did they arrive at that price? So if the seller says, yeah, right now I want 90,000 for this lot. Okay, Mr. Seller, how did you arrive at that price? And then be quiet. Because now they're gonna have to think. They're gonna have to think like, dang, how did I come up with this price? Because comps tell me I know what my buyer's paying. My buyer basically pays retail. So I know my buyer's paying 70. You want 90. How'd you arrive at that price? And a lot of times the seller, they'll either talk with ego behind them, like, hey, I own this lot for years. I want to sell it for this price, or I'm not going to do anything with it. I already held it. Sometimes they'll say that. Or sometimes they'll, have to really think about that. Like, this is what I thought it's worth. Then you could inform them this is, what we're paying right now. This is the retail price based on comps. You can even send them comps if you have prop stream up, so that they can understand. And then from there, that might be a listing. It might not be a cash deal because they might not go lower than the buyer's price. They might, but that could be one of those listings like, hey, I know you want this price. I don't think it will sell within the next year or two at that price due to the market. But if you were looking to sell quick, we would have to be at this price. And, we'll take care of closing costs, things like that, and see if that works. So, like, what are certain questions that you guys get that kind of surprised you whenever you're speaking to a seller? And you could put that in the chat if you don't want to speak up, but I'm just curious of what you guys been hit with if you guys, been cold calling. So, but another thing I would say is certain things you want to have already lined up when you're speaking to a seller as well. So, like, certain questions that they may say is like what company you work for, or who's your title company, or um, how long does it take to close? Why does it take so long? It's just land. These are like common questions that you want to already have in the back of your mind. So whenever they say something, you could already have an answer for it. So yeah, I work for EDB Investment Solutions. We buy land and build single family duplex homes in the area. And we're just reaching out because we actually bought one not too far from yours. So we wanted to see if you would consider a cash offer, something like that. Or the title company we usually work with. We usually work with multiple different title companies. We go for the one that gives us the best rates on closing costs because we usually pay all closing costs. For this deal, we'll be paying the closing costs. So then this is where you reference a couple different title companies. Even if you don't use those title companies, you want to give him or tell them multiple just so that they feel comfortable, right? because if you could say that, yeah, we use Steel City title. Sometimes we use Shem Tov title, American Land title of America. We use them as well. So this lets them know, like, oh, they use multiple different. Oh, they must be buying multiple lots, and this is what we do. Even though we're not buying it, we work for the buyer, right? So anything that they have, like any credentials the buyers have, we have as well, because we're supplying the lots for them. Even though we're not exclusively working for one buyer company, um, we do work with them. So this is where I would say, when they ask about title companies, that's what I would say. What's another thing that's common? Um, how quickly can you guys close? Usually we close within 30 to 45 days. We do have to schedule an environmental study and a survey on the land. So as quickly as we get the paperwork signed is as quickly as we could get those scheduled so we could close quicker. Like these are things that I usually say to a seller, like, oh, okay. So now I know, like, if I send them the contract, they're usually going to sign within a day or a couple hours, because now they know that the quicker they sign, the quicker they could close. Even though if it's not necessarily right, like in terms of we might have to close in 45 days instead of 30, it just gets them comfortable to sign quicker, right? So what's a good list to pull for acres of land? I mean, there's not, it depends on where you're at too. I would say, because I mainly focus on Florida, I would just say mainly counties. The reason why, because it's not that many acres of land. Like when you're looking, like let's say you put Davenport, Florida, right? You're not gonna get that many acres of land. But if you put Polk County, Florida, you're gonna get more acres of land. Just because with acres, it's a smaller list compared to infill. So that's why I would say, like, look at counties. That's what I usually do. I usually get acres of land in each county, and then sometimes you could break that list up. You could look at 1 to 5 county, I mean acres, or 10 plus acres, things like that. And then I would say also go based off of a buyer that you may have. So reach out to a buyer that bought acres in the past, ask him what he's looking for, and then base your filters off of what your buyer is already looking for. All right. When does it pick back up? January, February, or later typically? I would say, I mean, you could close deals in any season, right? But I would say, yeah, beginning of the new year. That's why I say, like, don't stop marketing either, because you may get a deal now or early December that has you ready for closing for January. Like, I'm not sure if I told y'all that story where I got a 20K deal. And I said this on the podcast. This was last year. I got a 20K deal in Calabash, North Carolina. And I only got that deal because I was showing my cousin one day, I think it was either Thanksgiving or Christmas. I was showing him, like, yo, you could do this anywhere, right? So I'm at the kitchen table, I mean, the dining room table with my cousin, and I'm on Zillow showing him different markets. We've seen Calabash, Florida. We've seen a lot of lots sold, in this season over there. So I reached out to a couple buyers, found a buyer, and then we did the seller marketing. And when we did the seller marketing, we didn't even use the buyer that I found. Uh, we got this lot for, I believe, 19 or 20,000, and we seen a buyer that bought the lot adjacent from it for 45,000. So we got in touch with that buyer through True People Search. We let him know, like, hey, we got the lot adjacent for yours. We'll sell it to you for 40,000, and he agreed. And in 2 weeks, I made 20,000 from that deal. So, and this was like the top of the year. So this was like in January. So right when January happened, had a 20K check coming in. So This is why I say don't stop marketing, because you never know. You might get something in December where people need money, because this is usually where people spend the most money during the holidays, traveling, buying gifts, things like that. So this is where you might catch a seller slipping where they're willing to sell for a discount, and then we're able to make money on it. All right. I think, am I the end buyer? Can they use their title company? I would say for the most part, you're not the end buyer unless you're buying to hold it. That's why we have, cash buyers, builders, things like that. And can they use their title company? I mean, that's up to the buyer. Certain buyers, when you're dealing with big buyers, they're gonna have their own title company, like big builders, that they work with, so they won't use the seller's title company. But when you're working with a local buyer in the area, they will be more flexible to use the seller's title company. All right. So another question, somebody said, yes, negotiating with sellers, absolutely trigger words not to use with them. So trigger words I would not use is like, sell, things like that, sell. I don't know any at the top of my head, but I wouldn't like say sell or I'm following back up, things like that when you're calling the seller back. What else? Those are the only two that really comes on top of my head. But things like that. Best areas to look at for sellers in Florida. I mean, there's no best area. I don't feel like there's no best area. The best area is where you find a buyer that's buying and enough land that you could, negotiate on to bring to them. So there's no one particular area that's best. You just want to have a really good buyer and enough land that you could do like lead generation to bring them any deals. So, and then I would say to that is the best area to look at sellers is the best area. The best area is going to be the area you're consistent with, so that you do all forms of marketing where you text, cold call, direct mail, right? To a buyer that's like currently buying, that's usually paying around retail, because most buyers do want a discount of 60%. So that means you got to get it at like 40, 50% to make a deal. The reason why I use my buyer that I post each month is because they pay basically retail. So, you know, even though the seller wants, let's say, retail or a little bit less, we could still make some type of money. And then when you do find somebody that's willing to sell for, let's say, 60%, we can make some good money on those, you know. But if you're looking at typical regular land buyers, they want to be at 60 to 70%, sometimes even lower. So you're not really going to make any money even when you get the seller at, like, let's say 50% of the value, because these typical land buyers, like mom and pop land buyers, they want land at a discount, or they could just find land on the MLS for retail. You get what I'm saying? So how to get the buy box when builders say just send me what you have. I mean, what I used to do is I used to send them like ghost lots that I typically don't have any conversation with, but I see a lot in the area, and I would send it to them for a higher price that then they are buying, and they would just tell me, "Hey, I need you to be at this price for this one. If you could get the seller down to this price," and then that will let me know, okay, I need to get all my lots at this price or lower, uh, to send to them, even though that one I was just using as like a fake, a decoy. So that's what I would say. But there's nothing you could really say if they say just send me what you have for their buy box, because the reason why they're telling you just send me what you have is because they've been hit up before by other wholesalers that didn't perform. So they don't want to waste their time. They're not just trying to, have a conversation with you. They want you to actually perform. So that's where I'll send them, like I said, a decoy lot and act like I got it under contract, even though I don't, even though I probably never even spoke to the seller and I just used this address. But I always make sure I mark it up higher than what they're paying or what they bought for so that they could tell me what price I need to be at. And then from there, like I said, it's like basically reverse engineering. Overcoming seller objections and negotiating. I just did that a little bit earlier, so hopefully you were here to listen to that. Why do acres other seller markets? I mean, the reason why I would say do acres with the infill is because everybody's doing infill. Well, now I'm not gonna say everybody's doing infill. There's not even really so much. Not as many people are making offers on acres. Not as many people is cold calling acres. Not as many people are focused on acres. So that's why I say do acres as well, is because all you need is maybe 2 or 3 acres deal in 1 year and you're good for the year compared to like you need 20 or 30 infill lots, to make a good enough. I mean, it really depends on the deal size, but typically, like to have a good year, I would need, like me personally, I would need to close 25 plus deals for that year. So I know everybody's different, but that's just like for me. So the reason why I say focus on acres is because they're higher price points. So you're not going to need as many deals with higher price points lots because let's say you're working on a 300K 10-acre lot and you find a buyer for 350, now you just made 50,000 on that deal. Somebody like the seller still making great money at 300K. You get what I'm saying? And things like that. So that's why I would say acres is just like a higher price point and more people aren't, like most people aren't looking at those. Most people are calling like the Lehigh Acres, the Port Charlotte, the 18K, the 20K lots. But how much money can you squeeze from those deals? You get what I'm saying? Those are going to be your smaller deals, your 2,000, your 5,000. Sometimes you might get lucky and make 10,000, right? But it's not common where you make good profit on those deals. Those deals to me is just really to get you in the game and also like pay your bills, you know, get a couple thousand going, things like that. Pay for marketing, things like that. So that's why I tell you guys like you get 2 or 3 $2,000 deals, that's 6,000 in a month, right? Most people don't make 6,000 at their job. Or you get 2 4K deals, that's 8K. Most people don't make 8K at their job. So that's why I would say focus on that. But I would say implement both. With texting, this is why it's important to have a texting platform, right? Because when you have a texting platform, you could pull as many lists as you want and text all of them, right? Now is you can't do it all at one time, but like let's say this week or these next 2 weeks, you're focusing on, let's say, Point Siena, Florida, for example, right? You found a buyer. Like it's fairly simple. Find a buyer, pick an area, find a buyer, text the whole area, right? You're gonna get some leads. Hopefully, you get a deal or two. But let's say you get some leads, you recycle. I mean, you keep hitting those leads up like as follow-ups as you're texting the next area. So now the next area you pick, let's say Lehigh Acres, right? 33971 or 33976. Now you're texting that area, but you're still following up with the area in Poinciana, and you repeat that process, right? So like texting, you're gonna get a lot more text messaging going out compared to like cold calling, direct mail. That's why I feel like it is important we all have a texting platform. The thing is, it is gonna cost you as you buy more lists, things like that, because those list costs, it costs to send out text messaging, things like that. So uh, it's going to cost you. You want to have a budget for it. But if you have a budget, let's say you just closed a deal, you made 5,000, you don't want to like just ball on that yet. You want to reinvest that. This is why I would say definitely get a texting platform and get as many lists as you can, because it is a numbers game. Like all sales, all marketing is a numbers game. The more people you reach out to, the more yeses you're going to get. The more yeses you get, the more contracts you get. The more contracts you get, the more likely you're going to get a deal that closes. All right. So that's where I hope that answers your question. And then how to spot an underrated market. How do you spot an underrated market? I mean, I would say by catching, and this is from my experience, catching a market when you see prices go up, right? And the only way to do that is by, tracking what you're doing. So, for example, like if you're focusing on Florida, right? And you've been in this group for a year, you should know the pricing in almost each area of Florida. So, like the east side of Florida, like the Tampa, the Spring Hill, the Citrus Springs, the Royal Highlands, the Homosassa. Then you have Southeast Florida, the Lehigh Acres, Port Charlotte, the North Port, the Rotunda West, the, you know, uh, Deep Creek, all of that. You should know those pricing, right? And then you have the west of Florida. You should know the Palm Bays, the Palm Coast, the Vero Lakes. You should know the pricing of each of those areas. And this is just like the main markets in each of those areas. Now you want to track what those prices are because you want to catch the pricing when they go up. So when you say like, I wouldn't say like an underrated market because most people know those markets, but the thing is catching the pricing when it goes up and making money when it does. Like for example, last year at this time, Palm Coast was selling for around 40,000, right? Now Palm Coast is selling for around 70,000. So as those prices increase, whoever was in Palm Coast made some great money, right? Because now they could offer 50 when the builder goes to 55, or when the builder went to 70 and the sellers wanted 60,000 for their lot at 40,000. Now that they could do 60, they could bring it to the buyer at 70 and made 10,000. So I don't know who in the group did that, but there's going to be markets as time goes on that's going to do that as well. So just like when I started years ago and Port St. Lucie was selling for 20K and now it's at 145K, and I made, some great money as the price was going up. That's going to happen in all these areas. And this is why it's important where like time in the market is more important than timing the market. Because if you guys don't quit and you just stay in this land business, even though it's not popping for you right now, you don't know what happens in 2026. You don't know what happens in 2027. Who says these markets don't all increase, go up 25, 30, 40%? You know, think of it like this. A lot of these people in Lehigh Acres, I believe it was Lehigh Acres, you'll see some lots that was bought 20, 30 years ago. and these people pay like 175,000 or something like that. Not, don't quote me on that exact number, but you see they paid way more than what the lots is going for right now. You like, why would you spend 30 years ago 125,000 for this lot that's selling for 20,000 right now? It's because that's how much that lot was going for 20, 30 years ago. And the market just declined. And now the market may go up back to where that is. So you're going to see a lot of these areas, especially another reason why land is good, just like Bitcoin, is the scarcity of it. So when you think of infill lots, when I first started, there was so many lots in all these areas, especially in Florida. Like you would think that like Lehigh Acres, for example, there was so much land in Lehigh Acres. Like these lots were selling for dirt cheap. And now there's so many houses over there, right? So now as less supply, more demand. I mean, prices go up as less supply. So as they continue to build throughout the years, we're going to be making money as these prices go up in these infilled areas, right? And now it'd be dope if one of us or a couple of us catch acres in the next Lehigh Acres area or the next area in the suburbs where they build on and sell it to like a D.R. Horton where they're going to build a community, but we were able to negotiate that deal and make, you know, a 6-figure acres deal from that, right? So that's why I say do both. But you'll be making money more than likely. I'll say it like this, you'll make the most money in this business when prices go up. If you're focusing on like a specific area, not doing a whole bunch of different areas, like different states, things like that, you'll make the most amount of money when prices go up in these areas. Because that's what was happening with me throughout, 2021 up until now. Like I made the most amount of money when I seen these prices go from, 20,000 to 40,000 to 60,000. Because there's so much land, right? It was so much land and prices went up. So the same thing, my builder was looking for, let's say 20 lots in Welland Septic in Palm Bay. He was looking for 12, 20 lots in Palm Bay City Ward. He was looking for 15 lots in Port St. Lucie. And all these prices was going up. This is how, like, it was so many of us closing, 10 plus deals a month because of that. Now, the market is in that consolidating phase where prices didn't really go up that much this year and last year. But who says that prices doesn't go up crazy this year? I mean, 2026. So, that's why I say stay in the market, always have, even if you guys decide like to learn a different skill per se, uh, still stay in this land business, because if you stay, you're going to experience that when these prices go up, as more land is being bought, as more houses is being sold in Florida and these other areas, Texas, Dallas, things like that. So timing the market is better than timing the market. If you plan on stopping and then waiting until it goes back up, you're already going to be too late, because you're going to lose to the person that already have these people in their CRM, already have these people in follow-up, already had conversations with these people. You're already going to be too late. And this is how, we're going to close deals, things like that. So I think that was the last question. I know Sharice mentioned something about developers. So yeah, if you could get a developer in your back pocket, definitely, definitely, because you never know what you like. Think of it like this: you could wholesale anything. I have people on my podcast that wholesale apartment buildings, making 300, 400K on a deal. So you could wholesale anything. It could be a building you could wholesale. right? Now, I don't know how that is, how that goes, because I never did it, but it's possible. So if you could get a developer, definitely get in their contact, you know, I'm not gonna say pick their brain, but have a conversation with them, learn that game as well. Because all this land is just a vehicle to make some good money to now eventually find what you actually want to do, right? Like this is not the end all be all in real estate. Honestly, to me, the land, what we're doing is the beginning stages of real estate. I used to think wholesaling houses was, but I really think wholesaling land is the beginning of real estate because without land, you can't build a house, right? And with land, it's the to me, the easiest conversation. Most like $1 million real estate investors, they're not focusing on land. Like people that, you think of it like this. What's the name? Brent Daniels, right? TTP. You think he's pulling land lists in Florida? He's not focused on this. They're not focused on the 2K, 5K, 8K deals. They're focusing on, the 50K and up deals. So this is where a lot of people like us, especially beginners that's just starting out, this is how you guys could start making some capital. Once you get the capital, now you could start doing different plays. You could still continue keeping your land business, but this is not supposed to be your end all be all. This is not supposed to be your only thing within the next 10 years you're doing. This is one of the things that you'll be doing, but you'll be doing other things as well. You have another business doing this. You have another business doing this while your land business is still making you money, but you'll have other businesses as well. This is just like a vehicle to get you to the destination. All right. This ain't the actual destination. So when it comes to development and finding a buyer for that, definitely don't limit yourself to only looking at this. Uh, with all wholesaling, to me, is fairly simple. You know, reverse engineer it, find a market, find a builder, and then find the product. So even with that development, once you have a buyer, now you just have to find the product, which is the land seller and or the commercial land for that developer, right? So ain't nothing to it but to do it. Anybody got any questions before we wrap it up tonight? Definitely some great questions. And I like this because it allows me to have something to like prepare for instead of just more so freestyling what you guys want to talk about. So like any questions that you guys have that don't get answered, I'll just save them for like these Thursday calls, or if you have any cold calling questions, you can save them for Saturday's call that don't get answered, and we'll have a better more informed call on these Thursday calls. And then, it's just really comes to is this business is simple, it's challenging, but it's simple. Don't overcomplicate it. You just want to find a buyer, an area, and the land seller. And when you're finding the land seller, you have the marketing, which is texting, cold call, direct mail. So if one thing isn't working for you, it's time to possibly do the next thing or do all three. Sometimes you may have to stick to just one because of the time you may have. So if you don't have no time to text, cold call, this is where you might have to send direct mail. But you better pick up your phone when these people call because you're spending the money for it. If you got time, but don't have necessarily the money, cold calling might be the best bet for you, right? And if you have the time plus the money, it might be best to do texting and all three. So, but as long as you're having enough leads coming through, where you like, mark down, you should be having multiple leads coming through. Not every lead is going to be warm and hot, but if you get like, let's say 10 or 20 cold leads, you should be getting at least one or two warm leads in that. And then from there, those may turn into hot throughout time. So just keep that in mind. Keep marketing, keep reaching out to buyers. If you're looking at different states, this would be the best time to do that. Find a buyer in a different state, maybe look for them. Like this is a time where you could kind of like try something new as well around this time, because once the new year starts back, my buyer is going to be buying a whole bunch of lots, and I know you guys are going to want to focus on that. So this would be the time where I say, get out of your comfort zone, try something new, maybe reach out to a buyer. Let's say, I'm gonna just say a random area, New Hampshire, right? A land buyer. See what he's looking for. Pull a list, see what they're looking for. See if you can make some money somewhere completely different, right? This would be that time where I say, try something new, get out of your comfort zone, reach out to acres as well, and just stay consistent. All right. Brahima, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Well, thank you for like this. I really appreciate it. My question was like I was looking at Lehigh Acres and I know you had described it as well. Like I noticed like most of the sellers they want like a higher price and like the spreads are like low. What are some areas like you suggest like that we look at in Florida for like higher spreads?
I would say, quote, reach out to acres, acres in Florida.
Sorry, can you say the place one more time?
Reach out to acres in Florida, acres of land.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem. And before y'all go, I know y'all see Bitcoin's price. It's like 87,000 right now. Uh, to me, that's honestly a good thing because now our dollar goes further. So just remember, you put a dollar in today, you probably get like 1,000 plus satoshis, like 1,100. Just keep that in mind, y'all, because a dollar 2 months ago was only getting you like 800 satoshis or 790 satoshis. So your dollar goes further right now. So try to stack up as many as you can, even if you're buying $1 an hour right now, or $2 a day, $3 a day is super important because once it goes back to the 100,000s, we're not ever gonna see under 100K again. And our kids, their kids will never experience a Satoshi for under $100,000. So we have that privilege and opportunity. And even though things are down right now and it may seem fearful, this is honestly where you're supposed to be buying as much as you can. So keep dollar cost averaging in, keep stacking. If you never bought before, download Coinbase.com and start buying now. Uh, and even though it may not seem a lot, 1,000 satoshis or $1 to get you 1,000, just think of that. $10 is getting you 10,000 plus satoshis, which is like crazy to me because that $10 or that 10,000 satoshis, you put that on a hardware wallet, a ledger. Don't touch it for 10, 15 years. Wait until your kids is ready to go to college. And I bet you that money is going to be paying for their college tuition or for them to start up a business in the future. So we also got to think like that as well. Like these small amounts, they seem small today, but they're going to be huge in the future. Just like if we, creating a garden, you got to start with small seeds, water it, and you keep on doing that, it's going to turn into a great garden. So I believe, I forgot who said this. I don't want my son getting it from the trenches. I want it to get it from the garden, right? So start planting those seeds now, right? Buy Bitcoin, even if it's $1 an hour, $1 a day, something. Please don't be at 0 Satoshis by the end of this year. All right. Y'all have a good night.